Is the overhead press bad for delt growth? Ooh, how could he?
Unfortunately, Mike is wrong about this one. What's cracking, guys? Omar Isaf here, back with another video. This is gonna be a hot video. It's gonna be maybe a little contentious because none other than Dr. Mike Israetel, who I greatly respect. I think Renaissance Periodization is one of the best fitness channels on YouTube right now, period. Mike is very smart, he's very funny, which is underrated, and perhaps most importantly, he has a monstrous overhead press, which is what we're talking about today. Because Mike feels in one of their latest videos, I got tagged in, of course, as the patron saint of the OHP, I must defend its honor. He said that you should not do the overhead press if you want to build bigger deltoids. And that actually is something that I disagree with. I've known Mike for years, so it's nothing but respect. We're talking about actually what's inside this video, and I broadly agree with a lot of his fundamental points, but I think it's the conclusion that he arrives at that is questionable. So what is the argument? Okay, so first, he says that when it comes to the deltoid, so we have the front, side, and rear deltoid, that the overhead press is fantastic, or at least it's excellent for the front delt. And we agree on this emphatically, both of us. So the front deltoid actually, I think, is underrated for natural lifters, and that's why we have to contextualize this video. A natural versus enhanced person, they'll struggle a little bit more building their shoulders for a few different reasons. Why do you think when there's the natty witch hunt, people will take a look at cap delts and automatically assume if someone had them that they were under suspicion? Automatically, if something trains the front deltoids quite a bit, that's a really good sign, because as a natural, you can never have big enough shoulders. We want bigger front delts. So we can't understate that. It's assumed, and we know that due to the function of the front deltoid, right? When it comes to lifting the arm like so, the shoulder, the overhead press, we think about it. Oh, okay, it's good for the front deltoid, but that can't be understated. The bench press, if you're a powerlifting bro, is not enough in order to build your front deltoid. Then he goes to the rear deltoid, where he says that it doesn't really target the rear deltoid at all. And this is true, that it doesn't target the rear deltoid.
People say, oh, I need big delts, I'm gonna do overhead press. It basically doesn't train the rear delts at all.
This is the contentious part. Mike personally feels that it's not a great exercise for growing your side delts. And this is the part that I disagree on. I actually happen to think it is. And in fact, we can make two different arguments as to why. I have to give a shout out to Dr. Milo Wolf for this. You see, we have a cabal, those that overhead press, where we talk amongst ourselves. And there are two ways for taking a look at the overhead press in order to make the argument that it in fact can be a great side delt exercise. The first, we have to all agree that there's no longitudinal studies taking a look at the overhead press as well as the deltoids in terms of long-term growth. So we're speculating here. But if we're to speculate, as Mike is, we could do some informed speculation. And the two arguments we can make for the overhead press is first, and the strongest one by far, biomechanically. When we think about biomechanical reasoning based upon the movement of the humerus with the overhead press, it kind of mimics, it's sort of similar to what you do in the lateral raise. There likely is a lot of involvement of the side deltoid. Even better, it strongly loads the side delts in the lengthened position, which we know produces favorable hypertrophy results. The lateral raise, dumbbell lateral raise, does not. Think about the dumbbell lateral raise. Okay, so we have the humerus right here. We're loading the side lateral raise, and due to the line of pull, due to gravity, there's not a lot of work being done right here, right? It's only as we bring it up towards here, where your arm's parallel to the ground, that there's a lot of work being done. We know from the research as it relates to hypertrophy that the lengthened position, so down here when we're starting, is actually favorable for hypertrophy. And the overhead press, people will assume on the overhead press that your arm or your shoulder, it's merely almost like a front raise to press like so. But in fact, your arm or elbow will flare out. Anyone watch any video of any competent overhead presser, and let's say they start like this, it'll go like this. You'll internally rotate, and look at this movement. As we internally rotate, what's happening? Our elbow is once again flaring out, kind of similar to what we do on the lateral raise. Most importantly, as we said before, because you're starting from a lengthened position, so down here, and it's loaded, it actually is more favorable potentially for stimulating the side deltoid at that position. So a heavy overhead press, you're doing a lot of repetitions and you're executing proper form, we can make that argument that in fact it is targeting effectively your side deltoid. The second argument that we can make, the validity of using surface EMG as a predictor of hypertrophy has been heavily called into question, okay? But the most applicable direct evidence we do have at hand on activation of different heads of the delt does suggest that the side delt are involved during the overhead press, at least at comparable extent as they are during the lateral raise. I mean, as Mike pointed out, there's seemingly little to no activation of the rear deltoid. So we have surface EMG, that's not as important. I think the biomechanical reasoning is far more important, and intuitively, if we think about how the overhead press is performed, that makes a lot of sense. So that is the part that I think is contentious. I do believe that the overhead press is very good for building the side deltoid. And let's zoom out a little bit, because Mike framed the question, is the overhead press a great overall deltoid builder? And he said, you know, front, yes, side, not really, back, no. And I would say 2 out of 3, as Milo said, it ain't bad. I would say front, yes, side, yes, back, once again, no. But I think the analogy that I want to bring in this video, it's not perfect, but it'd be the bench press and doing a tricep isolation exercise, right? So the question, is the bench press a fantastic tricep builder? I would say it's very good, okay? You're working a lot of different muscle groups, so your triceps, your front delts, your pecs. Now, if instead you did, in particular, let's say for the long head of the tricep, an overhead tricep extension, is that superior for the long head? Most probably. A skull crusher versus what you do in the bench press, questionable, but again, because it's more direct, it's an isolation movement, probably the skull crusher would be superior solely for your triceps. But that's not how we think about our training in totality, right? It's everything in conjunction with one another. So you do the bench press, you do a few other movements, you do the skull crusher, and that's the total amount of stimulus you get for that particular muscle group, the triceps. Similarly, I think about it in the same way when it comes to the overhead press. We get fantastic stimulation from the front delts, some, or very good, I would say, in the side deltoid, and then you move on to your lateral raise. So when we talk about the question, is the overhead press very good for your deltoids overall? I would say definitely. The last point that Mike brings, though, that is interesting, and people would be surprised by my answer here, he brings up the fact that, okay, if you want to do the overhead press, we talked about this whole concept of stimulus to fatigue. So how much essentially stimulation can you get in that muscle or those areas versus the overall fatigue your body accumulates, that it's not as good as other variations, like a seated overhead press. Pick your poison, like a seated overhead press, Smith machine, OHP, or doing like a dumbbell seated overhead press. And I actually would agree with him on this, and that might shock some people as the patron saint of the overhead press, that if your only goal is hypertrophy, switching over to something that's not as fatiguing to other aspects of your body is not only completely fine, but if that is your goal, it may in fact be better for you. But we need to once again think about this a little bit. The whole argument by Mike, he was very strong at the overhead press, 275 pounds for 8 repetitions is insane. He would say the bracing, how his quads would cramp, it would take a long period of time for him to work up to that weight. For most people watching this video, we have to keep in mind the loads that are being lifted, because I think there's an absolute consideration. Once you're overhead pressing for reps above your body weight, that absolute load where it wants to shoot out in front of you, where you really have to resist that, that's where you need that, torso rigidity, stability, you need the bracing, the quads, the glutes, everything else. And as a lifter over time, when you perform a movement, you get more proficient at it. So the actual cost of performing that movement, I would say, gets lower as long as you're not freakishly strong like Dr. Mike. If you're overhead pressing for 8 repetitions, like 135, the overall need for you to brace and stay tight isn't as high as someone who's doing 270 pounds, even if it's the same relative RPE. What's more, I think of transference when it comes to some of these skill sets. And I think of being a lifter, you want to be someone that's competent, perhaps over time, if your goal isn't just hypertrophy, because we think about strength, we think about performing other movements. You want to do strongman, strong woman, you want to lift things over your head. This is an innately useful exercise for a wide variety of different reasons. And the overhead press standing more accurately trains that. The seated overhead press might be, and these are arbitrary numbers, might be an 8.5 out of 10 as it relates to hypertrophy. Standing overhead press, maybe an 8 out of 10, but we're losing some of that skill component. And then we can add 2 other caveats to this conversation. The other one would be ease of setting things up. So the overhead press right here, I'm at home. I have it with the squat rack. I could just set it up, away we go. Some people don't have access, but 2, perhaps the stronger argument once again, would be your personal involvement or feelings about a movement, as Mike was joking about at the end where he really liked doing it. If you're passionate about an exercise, you're gonna care about it, you're gonna execute it probably with better proficiency. You're gonna bring more to it, more energy. You're gonna be able to do more repetitions, you're gonna be able to progress. You're going to focus on it on a higher level. And that is considerable because while another exercise might be a little bit better, if you personally like doing an exercise more, I think that can override the inherent superiority of a certain movement. And that can't be understated. And that's why I think a lot of people like to do the overhead press due to, as Mike said, that no nonsense strength that one builds. And that really is the video. Again, I have a lot of respect for Dr. Mike. I look forward to seeing him in the future, chatting up, getting a great training session in as we did years ago as he helped us with Borshako, that translation. I've known him for years. And this video, there's a lot of really great points that he makes. It's just that conclusion at the end that I think is a little tenuous that you should not do the overhead press if you want bigger deltoids. It's great for building your deltoids. It's a fantastic mass builder. And even if you want to just go for hypertrophy, you can do other variations that are less fatiguing, but you can stick to the overhead press and get great results. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you agree or disagree, let me know in the comment section below. I will respond to some of the comments. Thank you so much for watching it. If you liked the video, like the damn video, and I'll see all you guys, my rascals, in that next one. Peace.
Big Hoss, can I get a spot? Yeah, I got you, Big Hoss.
Rascal Apparel just got bolder with our new limited edition Acid Wash Jorts. Coming in 5 brand new colors. Pale blue, black, magenta, blue, and stone gray. For men, women, and big hosses alike. Rascal Jorts, available now.
Jorts!